Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a shop that should not still be open. There is a particular kind of sadness that belongs only to shopping malls. Not the sadness of old houses, or empty churches, or overgrown cemeteries. Those carry a certain dignity in their decline, a sense of time having passed with some intention. The sadness of a dead mall is different. It is the sadness of a thing that tried very hard to be cheerful and then simply stopped. The sadness of a place built on brightness and noise, and the idea that people would always want to come. And then one day they didn't, and no one thought to tell the building. Marta knew this sadness well. She had been photographing dead malls for 3 years. She had walked the empty corridors of shopping centers in Wrocław and Łódź and Gdańsk, had moved through spaces that still smelled faintly of cleaning fluid and synthetic carpet and the ghost of a food court that no longer existed. She carried her camera, the way some people carry a notebook, as a way of paying attention, as a way of insisting that something was worth remembering, even after the world had moved on from it. The mall on the outskirts of Katowice had been on her list for a while. It had a name. Most malls do. But the letters above the main entrance had begun to come away from the facade, and now it said something that wasn't quite a word. The car park was enormous and nearly empty. Just a handful of vehicles clustered near the entrance, like survivors. The building itself was large and low and pale, the kind of architecture that had seemed modern once and now just seemed tired. The windows along the upper floor were dark. Some had been boarded. One had a crack running diagonally across it that had been taped and never repaired. The tape now yellowed and peeling at the edges. Marta stood outside for a moment before going in. She did this at every mall. It was a habit, or perhaps a ritual, a moment of acknowledgement, of standing at the threshold between the ordinary world and whatever particular atmosphere had settled into this particular place. Every dead mall had its own feeling. Some felt abandoned in haste, mid-breath, as though the last person had simply walked out one afternoon and not come back. Some felt resigned, slow, as though they had understood for a long time that their time was ending and had simply waited. Some felt watched. She wasn't sure yet which kind this was. She went in. The entrance hall was wide and low-ceilinged, the kind of space designed to feel welcoming, but which felt, in its emptiness, more like a waiting room. The floor was pale gray tile, scuffed at the center from years of foot traffic, and now polished only by its own neglect. A directory board stood near the entrance, its vinyl letters rearranged by time, and the hands of whoever had kept trying to maintain the illusion of currency. Several shops had no name at all. Marta paused and read the board. Mostly blank rectangles, the adhesive outlines of letters that had been removed. A few names she didn't recognize. And at the very bottom of the board, in smaller text, Papiernicza and upominki, poziom główny, korytarz wschód. Stationery and gifts. Main level, east corridor. She noted it and moved on. The main atrium was the kind of space she usually found most affecting. It had been built around a central open area, 3 floors of balconied retail space looking down onto a ground-level area that had once contained She could tell from the anchor points in the floor and the faint rectangular marks on the tiles. A carousel. Or perhaps a fountain. Something that had been the center of something. Now there was nothing. Just the pale floor and the emptiness above it, and the light from the skylights above falling in long, dusty columns that made the space feel like the inside of a church that had forgotten what it was for. Marta photographed for a while. She moved slowly, the way she always did, letting the place settle around her before she lifted the camera. She photographed the empty shop fronts, their gates pulled down and locked, some with the ghost of a logo, still printed on frosted glass. She photographed a children's play area, its padded floor still in place, its small plastic structures still standing in patient primary colors. A slide, a climbing frame, a soft tunnel, as though waiting for children who would not come. She photographed a bench where someone had left a single plastic bag. She did not look inside the bag. She made her way, eventually, to the east corridor. The corridor stretched ahead of her like a long exhalation. On either side, closed units. The gates were all down, the lights above each one extinguished. Some had signage still in place. The name of a shoe shop, a mobile phone accessory, kiosk, a place that had sold personalized mugs and key rings. Others had had everything removed, leaving only bare metal shutters and the marks on the floor where freestanding displays had once stood. The overhead strip lights flickered intermittently, not in a dramatic way, just in the way of things that had been left on too long. The kind of flickering that suggests not malice, but exhaustion. The corridor felt narrower than it probably was. Marta walked slowly, her footsteps very clear in the quiet. And then, at the far end, there was light. Warm light. Not the flat, flickering white of the overhead strips, but something different. Amber and steady. The kind of light that seems to come from a lamp rather than a fitting. It spilled out from a shop at the very end of the corridor, past all the dark units, at the point where Marta had expected the corridor simply to end. She stopped walking. She stood in the corridor for a moment, looking at the light. It was the light of a place that was open, that was functioning, that had, inexplicably, not received or not accepted the same news as every other unit in this corridor, which was that the time for being open had passed. She walked toward it. The shop had no gate. The gate had perhaps been removed entirely. There were no tracks on the floor in front of the entrance. No hardware on the door frame. It simply opened onto the corridor, as though it had never required closing. The window display was arranged with care, sheets of gift wrap in muted patterns, a selection of greeting cards fanned in a wooden rack, a small collection of notebooks and pens. Nothing remarkable. The kind of display you wouldn't look twice at in a functioning shopping center. And yet here, at the end of this corridor, in this particular light, it had the quality of something curated, something deliberate. Marta stood in the doorway. The shop was small, not cramped, but compact, the kind of small that suggests everything has its place. The walls were lined with greeting cards in transparent sleeves, sorted by occasion. Birthdays, anniversaries, new arrivals. Get well. Congratulations. A full wall of sympathy cards to the left, she noticed, though she didn't linger on them. The shelves along the back held notepads, journals, small gift sets. Everything was tidy. Everything was current. Not retro, not vintage, not a stock room that had stopped receiving deliveries. The cards were from this year. The notebooks were from brands she recognized. And behind the counter, a woman. She was difficult to age. That was the first thing Marta thought, and then felt slightly embarrassed for thinking, and then returned to because it was simply true. The woman was not young, but she was not old. She had the kind of face that seemed to have settled into itself over a long period and arrived at something steady. Her hair was dark with threads of gray, pulled back simply. She wore a pale blue blouse, slightly formal, and she looked up when Marta entered with the particular expression of someone who had been expecting someone and was not surprised that it was this particular person. "Dzień dobry," she said. "Good day." And then, reading something in Marta's face. Or "Good evening. I lose track this time of year." Her Polish was fluent but careful, in the manner of someone who had spoken it for a long time and still found it worth the attention. "Good evening," Marta said. She held up her camera slightly, by way of explanation or apology. "I'm photographing the mall for a project." "Of course," the woman said, as though she had heard this before. Marta moved slowly along the wall of cards, not because she needed a card, but because it seemed impolite to stand in a shop and not look at anything. The cards were well made. She found herself genuinely pausing at a few of them. One with a watercolor of a winter forest, another with a simple geometric pattern in blue and gold. She took them from their sleeves and looked at them properly. After a while, she asked, "How long has this shop been here?" The woman behind the counter was arranging something on the shelf beside her. She didn't stop what she was doing. "Since before the mall," she said. Marta looked up. This was a stationery shop on this street since 1972. A small shop then. Just a shop front, a storeroom behind. When they built the mall, they built it around us. We've been here since before the tiles on this floor were laid. She paused, placing something on the shelf with a small, precise movement. "The mall will be gone before us." She said it without satisfaction and without sadness. She said it the way you say something that is simply true. Marta stood with a card in her hand and didn't say anything for a moment. "I'll take this one," she said finally, because it seemed the thing to do. She brought the card to the counter. It was the winter forest one, she thought. She had been holding the winter forest one. The woman took it and looked at it briefly and then placed it in a small paper bag. She pressed the card gently to keep it flat, folded the bag top with 2 clean folds, and placed it on the counter. Marta paid in cash. The woman made change from a small wooden till that Marta had not noticed before. It was the old-fashioned kind, the kind that opened with a lever, and the sound it made when it opened. A small, clean ring. Seemed to belong to a different room in a different decade. "Dziękuję," the woman said. "Thank you." And then, "I hope the project goes well." Marta said thank you and meant it and left. She walked back down the east corridor. The strip lights flickered as she passed beneath them. The closed gates reflected her shape back at her in dull metal. She did not look back at the lit shop at the end of the corridor. She didn't know exactly why she didn't look back. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt more like respect. like not interrupting something that was quietly continuing without her. She drove home with the paper bag on the passenger seat. It was late by the time she got in. She put her camera bag down. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table with the tea and the small paper bag. And only then, in the quiet of her own flat, in the ordinary light of a kitchen in the middle of an ordinary evening, did she take out the card. She looked at it. It was not the winter forest. It was not the geometric blue and gold. It was a sympathy card, pale with a simple border. The kind of card designed to carry difficult words without adding to their weight. She was certain she hadn't chosen a sympathy card. She remembered the winter forest. She'd been holding the winter forest. She turned it over. The back was blank, as it should be. She opened it. Inside, in handwriting, small, neat, the handwriting of someone who had been writing things by hand for a very long time, were 2 lines. You were going to need this. I thought I'd save you the trip back. Marta sat at her kitchen table for a long time. The tea went cold. The flat was quiet. Outside, the city made its ordinary sounds. A distant car. The particular silence between sounds that belongs to late evenings in a residential street. She sat and held the card and thought about the woman in the shop and the amber warmth of that light and the wooden till with its small, clean ring. She thought about what she was going to need this for. She didn't have an answer. She had only the card in her hands and the particular cold of tea that has been left too long and the quiet, steady feeling of something waiting. She placed the card on the table. She looked at the handwriting. She thought about going back, about walking that east corridor again, past the flickering lights and the closed gates, to the warm shop at the end. She thought about standing in the doorway and holding up the card and asking the woman what she meant. But she thought, somehow, that the woman would not be surprised to see her. And she thought, somehow, that the answer would not be one she was ready to hold yet. So she left the card on the table, and she went to bed. And in the morning, the card was still there, exactly where she had left it. She did not put it away. She left it where it was, on the kitchen table, in the small paper bag with the 2 clean folds at the top. She made coffee and stood at the window and looked out at the ordinary street and the ordinary morning, and tried to hold on to the feeling of something ordinary and immediate. The card stayed on the table for 3 weeks, and then one evening, her phone rang. And when she put the phone down, she sat very still in her kitchen chair for a long moment. And then she reached for the card, and she understood. She did not go back to the mall. She didn't need to. But sometimes, in the way that certain places stay with you, the way a smell can carry an entire afternoon back across years, she thought about that warm light at the end of the corridor, about the woman who had been there since before the tiles on the floor were laid, about the wooden till and its small, clean ring, about what it might mean to outlast the thing that was built around you, about what it might mean to know what someone is going to need before they need it. The mall on the outskirts of Katowice was scheduled for demolition the following spring. Marta read about it in a local news brief. She thought about the East Corridor, and the flickering lights, and the warm shop at the end. She thought about what the woman had said, "The mall will be gone before us." She had said it without satisfaction, and without sadness. She had said it the way you say something that is simply true. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest shops keep the longest hours. If the stillness stayed with you, if the amber warmth of that light lingered somewhere, then let it remain a little while longer. Some places know us before we know them. Rest now. The card will find you when it's time.